the fairies' treasure of compassion. It was said that the whispering woods held secrets woven from threads older than the stars. In the farthest corner of this forest, veiled in mist and mystery, lay a place untouched by the desires of the ordinary heart. Travelers called it forbidden. Scholars dismissed it as mere legend. But the old women of the village would lean close to the fire and whisper, with eyes full of flickering shadows, that the forest harbored a golden chest, a treasure hidden by the fairies themselves, nestled somewhere deep within, guarded by enchantments only kindness could unravel. The whisper of this treasure floated through the winds of the world, drawing seekers of every sort. Warriors sought it to prove their valor, merchants to secure fortunes beyond measure, and the young, with restless dreams, to fulfill a destiny their hearts barely understood. But each seeker returned empty-handed, if they returned at all. For the forest did not yield to those who sought glory or riches. Instead, it turned away all who entered with hunger in their hearts and pride in their gaze. Yet the woods would sometimes choose to speak. And when they did so through whispers of mist and moonlight. This is how it was with Elara. Elara was a girl of quiet spirit, with eyes as soft as a doe's and footsteps that barely whispered to the earth as she walked. She had no dreams of fortune, no yearning for glory. What she did have was a heart that swelled at the sight of an injured bird or a lost fawn. Those who knew her said her kindness was her gift and her burden, for she could not help but see the world through the eyes of all living creatures. One evening, as she sat beside her cottage window, watching the dusk settle over the fields, she felt a strange stirring, a sound not of this world. It was a voice, soft and distant, like the echo of a lullaby from a forgotten dream. It was not quite a sound, but more a feeling, a beckoning, tugging at her, urging her to listen. "Elara," it seemed to call, "come find what your heart seeks." She knew somehow that it was the forest speaking to her. A shiver ran through her, not from fear, but from a curiosity that tingled in her bones. She knew the tales of the whispering woods, the warnings and the cautions, but something within her stirred with a force that could not be ignored. The call was a whisper, woven with secrets, and she felt compelled to heed it. As dawn broke, Elara set out. She carried nothing but a small satchel, filled with herbs and bandages, as if knowing deep down that she would not need weapons or armor for the journey ahead. Her footsteps were light and hesitant as she entered the woods, her breath mingling with the cold mist that clung to the trees. The world around her grew strange and silent, each step drawing her further from the familiar and into a realm where shadows whispered and light danced in ways that made one question what was real. The forest seemed to watch her. The trees stood still as sentinels, their ancient branches arched high above her, cradling the sky. She felt the weight of eyes on her, though there was no one in sight, only the distant calls of birds and the soft rustle of unseen creatures. As she walked, strange things began to happen. Leaves trembled at her passing, as if in greeting, and vines parted in front of her as though sensing her path. It was not long before she found the first of the woodland creatures, a small bird with a wing twisted at an unnatural angle lay on the path before her, its tiny body shivering with pain. Elara knelt, her fingers gentle as she lifted the bird into her hands. She whispered to it, soft words of comfort as she wrapped its wing in a makeshift bandage from her own cloth. The bird's eyes held hers for a moment, a fleeting look, yet it felt as though something passed between them, a silent understanding. With a grateful chirp, the bird fluttered away, disappearing into the canopy above. As she continued, she noticed how the forest seemed to shift. The path before her grew clearer, and the mist, which had clung to her ankles, lifted slightly, unveiling small patches of wildflowers and moss. It was as if the forest itself acknowledged her kindness, guiding her deeper, but in ways so subtle they might have been missed by anyone not watching with her quiet intensity. Elara moved forward, deeper into the whispering woods, a feeling of purpose growing within her. She sensed the forest was testing her, though she did not yet know why. But as each step took her further into the unknown, she felt a certainty blossom in her heart, a feeling that she was being drawn towards something meant only for her, something beyond any treasure of gold or jewels. And in the quiet places between her thoughts, she heard it again, that faint whisper, gentle as the morning fog calling her onward. Only those who carry kindness in their hearts may find the treasure. Thus began Elara's journey, a path woven with mystery and the forest's unseen magic, guiding her ever onward toward the hidden heart of the whispering woods. As Elara moved deeper into the forest, the trees grew denser, their branches twisting above her like the fingers of some ancient, slumbering giant. The light of day barely filtered through, casting only the faintest glow on the path before her. In this dim world, every step seemed to echo with secrets. Every rustle felt like a whisper, and the very air hummed with an enchantment older than memory. Elara sensed the forest watching her, but it was not the indifferent gaze of stones or trees. It was something more attentive, something that waited. It was as though the woods themselves wanted to see what she would do, to understand what lay within her heart. It was then she encountered her first true companion on this journey, a small fox, its fur a deep russet, emerged from the shadows. Its steps were unsteady, and its eyes held a flicker of fear. Around its slender leg was a cruel iron snare, a remnant of hunters who dared encroach upon this forbidden place. The fox's fur was matted with dried blood, and it limped As it tried to stay out of her reach, its movements full of distrust and pain. Elara felt a pang of sadness. She knelt and extended her hand, speaking softly, her voice barely louder than a murmur. "I will not harm you," she whispered, her words laced with a gentle kindness. The fox hesitated, its amber eyes flickering with a mix of fear and curiosity. Slowly, it edged closer. Elara moved as if in a trance, her hands light as they untangled the snare and pressed herbs against the wound. The fox tensed under her touch, but as she worked, it began to relax, its eyes softening in gratitude. When at last she finished, the fox turned, limping back into the shadows, pausing only once to look back. And then, as though by magic, the forest shifted again. The branches parted just slightly, revealing a hidden path cloaked in a veil of moss. Elara smiled, feeling that she was being led, that the forest had recognized her first act of kindness. As the day wore on, she continued deeper into the woods, each step bringing her closer to the unknown heart of this mystical land. She saw signs of life everywhere. Small nests nestled in the crooks of trees, delicate mushrooms growing in the damp earth, the faint hum of bees hovering around hidden flowers. There was life here, more vibrant and varied than she had ever known, and she felt honored to walk among it. Then the second creature appeared, as if by design. It was a deer, graceful yet weakened, its eyes dull with pain. It lay beside a patch of sacred lilies, flowers that were known to heal but were cherished by the forest's spirits. The lilies, radiant with a soft, pale glow, held a magic that kept the balance of the forest intact. To pluck them would be to disrupt that balance, to tamper with the fairies' ancient blessings. Elara's heart ached for the deer, whose breaths came shallow and strained. She knelt beside it, her hand hovering over the lilies. She knew the cost of taking them, but the creature's suffering weighed heavily on her. With a sigh of acceptance, she reached out, plucking a few lilies, whispering words of apology to the forest. As she pressed the petals against the deer's wounds, a strange warmth spread through her fingers, and the deer's eyes brightened with a gentle light. It stood, strong once more, and gazed at her with a gratitude that needed no words. As it trotted away, the lilies she had left untouched began to bloom even more brilliantly, as if the forest, in its silent wisdom, had accepted her offering and her promise to honor it. And so, the forest revealed another path, veiled by ferns and trailing vines. Elara followed, feeling that the forest, strange and sentient, was testing her heart in ways only it could. The final trial of her journey found her as dusk began to fall, casting the forest in shades of silver and shadow. The path led her to an ancient tree, its bark twisted with age, its branches thin and fragile. At its highest point, a nest of baby birds lay, nestled close to their mother, whose breathing was faint, her wings tired from long journeys. Elara glanced at the sky, where dark clouds gathered ominously. A storm was coming, and its winds would be fierce. She could press on, eager to reach the treasure, but she knew the nest would not survive the storm alone. With a sigh, she climbed the tree, her hands rough against the bark, her breaths steady. She reached the nest and covered it with her cloak, shielding the small creatures beneath it as rain began to fall in torrents around her. She held her ground, feeling the tree sway under the wind's force, yet she remained steadfast, her arms wrapped around the fragile nest, protecting it as best she could. When the storm passed, and the first beams of moonlight broke through the clouds, the mother bird lifted her head, her eyes bright with life. She chirped a soft note of gratitude, and Elara felt a warmth spread through her chest, a feeling of peace, of joy, as though the very heart of the forest had blessed her. As she climbed down, the path ahead was illuminated, not by the sun or moon, but by a soft glow that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Elara knew in her heart that she was being guided towards something rare, something beyond her understanding. And so, with her spirit alight, she ventured deeper, each step leading her closer to the forest's whispered heart, and the treasure it guarded so carefully, awaiting only the kind-hearted to reveal its secrets. The forest had grown hushed, as if holding its breath. Elara felt a strange sensation in her chest, a tugging that seemed to guide her deeper still, into the heart of the forest where the light was dim, and shadows wove themselves into strange, shifting patterns. She sensed that she had come through some unseen threshold, entering a place that few had ever reached. Her trials had tested her in ways that were beyond strength or skill. They had asked her to open her heart, to embrace the smallest lives, and to sacrifice for beings that could offer her nothing in return. And still, something lay ahead, waiting. She followed the faint glow that had begun to illuminate her path. A soft, golden light like fireflies caught in a lingering twilight. She wondered if this was the treasure itself, calling her forward, drawing her ever closer with silent promise of something magical. Yet the path was not easy. Vines twisted underfoot, branches clawed at her clothes, and the deeper she went, the colder the air became, as though the forest itself was challenging her resolve with each step. Then, from the shadows, a figure appeared, a small hunched creature with skin like aged bark and eyes as dark as the forest at night. It had the look of something ancient, something that had grown up from the roots of the trees, a being belonging to the deep and silent places of the world. Elara, the creature rasped, its voice like leaves crunching underfoot. You come seeking the treasure, do you? Elara nodded, though she did not know if she sought the treasure for herself or for something beyond her understanding. The creature tilted its head, studying her with its midnight eyes. Many have come before you, it continued, and many have been turned away. The forest guards its secrets jealously, you see. It will not give its gifts to those who seek only gain or glory. So tell me, girl, why do you come? Elara's heart beat loud in her chest. She could feel the weight of the creature's gaze, the intensity of the forest pressing in, waiting for her answer. She took a breath and spoke, her voice quiet but unwavering. I come not for riches or power. I come because the forest called to me, because I feel there is something here that I am meant to protect, something beyond my own desires. If the treasure has gifts, they are gifts I wish to use to help others. The creature was silent for a long moment, and Elara could feel the forest listening, its silence thick with judgment. Then the creature spoke again, its tone softer, almost approving. Compassion, it murmured. A rare gift indeed, but words are only words. There is one last trial yet. As the creature stepped aside, the light around her dimmed, and the path before her twisted into darkness. She took a step forward, the weight of her resolve heavy in her heart, feeling as if she were moving not through the woods, but into a part of herself she had never known. Soon she came upon a glade, silent and still, at the center of which lay a creature she had never seen before. It was a wolf, though no ordinary one. Its fur was a pale silver, its eyes closed as if in sleep, yet its breathing was labored, pained. Around its neck was a collar of thorns, cruel and tight, cutting into its flesh. The creature's beauty and suffering was so profound that Elara felt her heart ache, as though she were connected to its pain. She knelt beside the wolf, her hands trembling as she touched the thorns. They were sharp, digging into her fingers as she worked to free it. Yet the wolf made no sound, only lay still, as though waiting. As Elara removed each thorn, the creature's breathing grew softer, more peaceful. Blood welled from her own hands, staining the earth as she worked. Yet she paid it no mind. Her only thought was for the wolf, her only desire to see it freed from its pain. Finally, the last thorn fell away, and the creature opened its eyes, two gleaming orbs of gold that seemed to contain the wisdom of the forest itself. The wolf rose to its feet, standing tall and proud, its gaze fixed on Elara with a deep, knowing look. She felt as though the very soul of the forest were looking at her, seeing into her heart, her mind, and every quiet, hidden corner of her being. She had passed through the trials not for reward, but for something greater, something beyond herself. She had given her kindness without thought of gain, had bled for creatures that could not thank her, and had shown her heart's true shape to the forest. The wolf dipped its head, a gesture of gratitude. And as it did, the glade was filled with light, a golden glow that rose from the earth, as if the forest itself was blessing her. And then, before her, the shadows parted to reveal a path. This time there was no mist, no darkness, only a warm light that led forward, calling her to the final heart of the forest. Elara rose, her hand still stinging, but her spirit light, and followed the path. She knew now that she was close, that the treasure was within her reach. Yet in her heart, she no longer cared for what she might find, only for the strange and wondrous feeling that had grown within her, a warmth that pulsed with the quiet magic of compassion. And so, with the forest watching and the light guiding her, she took her final steps, ready to discover the truth of the fairies' treasure. The path opened before Elara like a whispered invitation, leading her deeper into the heart of the forest. The air was different here, heavy with an ancient energy, as if every leaf, every root, every breath held a memory of old magic. The glow that had guided her softened, melting into a pale, ethereal light that bathed the trees and turned the shadows into silvery veils. Elara could feel it now, the pulse of something hidden, something sacred, as if the forest itself was alive with anticipation. She stepped carefully, each footfall quiet, respectful, as though she were walking upon hallowed ground. The silence was profound, not empty but rich, filled with the waiting presence of unseen eyes. It was a silence that held secrets, mysteries that lingered just beyond understanding. And yet, in that silence, Elara felt a calm settle over her. She felt the weight of her journey fall away, leaving only a gentle warmth, a kind of clarity that she had never known. In the center of a glade, bathed in moonlight, stood an ancient oak tree. Its trunk was wide and gnarled, wrapped in vines and moss. Its roots burrowed deep into the earth like the fingers of an old, wise hand. And there, nestled within those roots, was a golden chest, radiating a soft, otherworldly light. It looked almost as if it were breathing, its glow pulsing in harmony with the heartbeat of the forest. Elara approached, her steps slow, her breath caught in her throat. She had imagined this treasure many times, but to see it here, to feel its warmth and presence, was something beyond any dream. She knelt before the chest, her fingers tracing the delicate etchings that covered its surface. Runes and symbols older than memory, each line imbued with a magic that spoke to her heart. A soft whispering voice echoed in her mind, as if the chest itself were speaking. Those who seek with selfish hearts may come close, but will never find. Only the compassionate may behold the gifts of the fairies' treasure. Elara closed her eyes, the words washing over her like a blessing. She understood now. The forest had guided her, tested her, not for wealth or power, but to see if her heart could open wide enough to embrace all life. Each act of compassion had drawn her closer, had shaped her, until she stood here, her spirit touched by the silent beauty of the forest and its creatures. With gentle hands, she lifted the lid of the chest. Inside, there were no jewels, no coins, no gems to dazzle the eye. Instead, the chest held objects that seemed to glow with a quiet, serene light, simple, beautiful, and filled with a power that was both humble and profound. The first object she touched was a small vial, its liquid a deep, shimmering blue, like the sea under moonlight. She knew, without understanding how, that this was a vial of peace. One sip could calm even the stormiest heart, could bring tranquility to those who were lost in sorrow or anger. Beside it lay a smooth stone, warm to her touch, its color the deep red of embers. This was a stone of courage, a gift that would lend strength to those who face fear and doubt, a gift she could give to those who needed to find their own inner bravery. There was also a scroll bound with a delicate silver thread. Unrolling it, she saw words that danced and shimmered, written in a language she could not read but somehow understood. It was a scroll of wisdom, a blessing of knowledge and understanding for those who sought the answers to life's deepest mysteries. Each gift was more than it seemed, not meant to bring wealth or power, but to fill the hearts of others with compassion, courage, and wisdom. These were gifts of the heart, treasures that could transform lives in ways far richer than any gold or jewel. Elara's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the gifts, her heart swelling with a gratitude that felt boundless. She had come seeking something she couldn't name, and now she understood that this treasure was not for her alone. It was meant to be shared, a blessing that she would carry into the world. As she stood, the chest began to glow brighter, its light filling the glade, illuminating every leaf, every blade of grass, until the entire forest seemed to be bathed in a golden warmth. She felt the presence of the forest around her, a silent chorus of gratitude and approval, as though every creature, every tree, every stream were rejoicing in her understanding. The light grew softer, fading gently, and Elara felt the forest settle once more into its quiet mystery. The chest was gone, but the gifts remained in her hands, a reminder of the compassion that had led her here, a promise that she would carry forward. As she walked back through the woods, the forest seemed to welcome her, its shadows warm, its whispers filled with a new tenderness. She knew her journey was not over. It was only beginning, for she carried with her the true treasure of the fairies' heart, gifts of peace, courage, and wisdom, bound by the golden thread of compassion. And somewhere in the deepest parts of the forest, the fairies watched, unseen, as Elara left their sacred grounds, a soft smile upon their invisible faces, knowing that their treasure had found its true keeper. As Elara stepped from the heart of the forest, the gifts of the fairies' treasure cradled in her hands. The forest itself seemed to breathe with her, each sigh of wind, each creak of branches, each distant whisper carrying a resonance of her journey. She felt no weight, though she carried with her the most precious treasures hidden in the whispering woods. The vial of peace, the stone of courage, and the scroll of wisdom. They gleam softly, each filled with a quiet, gentle magic, ancient and wise. Elara knew, with a certainty that came from deep within her heart, that these gifts were not hers to keep. They were meant to be given, to be shared in moments when they would mean more than anything gold could buy. She felt like a vessel, one that the forest had filled with compassion and understanding. As she took her first steps beyond the shadows of the ancient trees, she knew her life would be forever different, touched by the forest's silent grace. The morning mist was just beginning to lift, casting a silvery glow over the world beyond the woods. She walked down the narrow path toward her village, her heart a blend of peace and purpose. She could feel the quiet hum of the gifts, as if they each held their own life, a pulse that synced with the heartbeat of the world. They were simple in appearance, yet their magic reached far beyond what her mind could fathom. It was not long before her path brought her upon her first chance to use one of the gifts. She encountered a man, slumped on the side of the road, his shoulders bowed as if burdened by the weight of his own despair. His face was hidden in his hands, his breaths shallow and ragged. She felt the echo of his sorrow, a sadness that pulled at her heart like a thread being tugged from some ancient tapestry. She approached him softly, her voice gentle. "Are you in need of peace?" The man lifted his head, his eyes hollow, lost. He did not speak, only nodded, as if he were afraid that words might shatter something fragile within him. Elara reached into her satchel, withdrawing the vial of peace. Its liquid glowed faintly, a deep, soothing blue that seemed to ripple like calm waters. She placed it into his hands, watching as his fingers closed around it, trembling. "Drink," she whispered, "and may peace fill your heart." He did as she asked, his lips pressing to the vial's edge, and as he drank, a transformation took place. His shoulders softened, his face lifted, and a warmth spread through his expression, as if the sunlight itself had touched him. The hollowness in his eyes filled with a gentle light, and for the first time, he looked at her with gratitude, a quiet, simple thankfulness that needed no words. He stood steadier now and walked away, leaving Elara with a heart that felt as light as the morning breeze. As she continued on her journey, she found others in need of the gifts she carried. A young girl, frightened and hesitant, who could barely bring herself to speak as she trembled in fear of some unknown future. For her, Elara offered the stone of courage, pressing it into the girl's hands with a promise that it would strengthen her heart. The girl clutched it, now, and a spark returned to her eyes, a flicker of bravery that would grow, fanned by the magic the stone held. Finally, As Elara neared her village, she met a weary elder, a woman who looked out across the fields with a distant sadness, as though searching for answers that had long eluded her. Elara understood her need, for she herself had walked this path, had sought wisdom from the forest's depths. She handed the elder the scroll of wisdom, and as the woman unrolled it, the words seemed to dance before her, filling her gaze with a profound understanding. The answers she had long sought, written not in ink, but in the language of the heart. As the sun began to set, casting the sky in hues of amber and violet, Elara felt the final weight of her journey lifting. She had given each gift, not with regret, but with joy, knowing that these moments of kindness would echo far beyond the forest's edge. She had come seeking something she couldn't name, and she was leaving with her heart fuller than ever, touched by the magic of giving, by the blessing of compassion. Elara knew that the forest's treasure was not one that could be hoarded or kept. It was a treasure that would be reborn in every act of kindness, in every hand extended, in every heart that opened itself to the world. The gifts she had carried had only been tools to awaken something far greater within herself, a compassion that flowed from the deepest parts of her soul, and that would, one day, inspire others. And so, she returned to her village, her steps lighter, her spirit alight with the gift she had received. A gift she would continue to share for all the days of her life. In her heart, she felt the forest's whisper linger, a promise and a blessing, as if it, too, knew that its true treasure was safe in the hands of one who had proven herself worthy. Thus, the legend of the fairies' treasure lived on, not as a tale of gold or riches, but as a story of kindness, a reminder to all who would listen that sometimes the greatest magic lies in the simplest acts of the heart. And somewhere, deep within the whispering woods, the fairies watched, their smiles as soft as moonlight, knowing that their gift had found its true home.